Today we are beginning chapter 40 of Tanya together. If we think about what kavana is, conscious intent, it's our inner dimension. Meaning if I'm just doing something with my hands, say I'm doing woodworking and I'm just doing it with my hands. So there's a certain level of my energy is going into that. Versus if I'm really thinking about who this is for and the joy of making it and really getting to the creative process, my more inner dimension, the part that you would even call me, is being involved in it. And so we put our inner dimension into something, into a mitzvah, or into our Torah learning, we're then able to enter the inner dimension of the Sefirot. Meaning, well, this is how it works. When we are doing avoda, our Torah mitzvahs ascend higher through the kavana. The kavana is the wings. So what's the entrance pass for it to enter into the inner aspect of the higher world, the 10 Sefirot, is if it came from a place of innerness, if it came from a place of kavana, of conscious intent, then my service can enter into the inner part of the inner higher worlds, which is the Sefirot. So in the higher worlds, there's the outer part, which is the chambers. And then there's the inner dimension, which are the 10 Sefirot. So Torah study and mitzvahs with kavana can enter into the inner dimension of the 10 Sefirot, corresponding to the different worlds that they're connected to. In contrast, when my inner dimension isn't present and I'm just learning something by rote, so what's going to happen then is I'm going to create angels in the higher world. So it's still having an effect, of course, but it's creating angels. So angels already are a creation versus godliness. So it's not that they're entering into godliness, my Torah mitzvahs. They're remaining within the realm of creation. And specifically, it's creating an angel in the world of Yetzirah, if it's Torah studied on my rote. And, basically to the spheres of Yetzirah and Asiya, the externalities of the world, mitzvahs done by rote. And so if we think about it, it makes sense. It's just cause and effect, because Yetzirah and Asiya are the more external worlds, right? The innermost world. It's not about higher and lower, it's about inner and outer. So the innermost world would be Atzilus, because it's the most inner dimension of godliness, whereas the more external worlds are the lower worlds, which are Yetzirah and Asiya. And specifically, the chambers are the external aspect of the worlds and angels are external creations, because the purpose of those worlds is not for the angels, and therefore they're considered external. So when I do a mitzvah in an external way, I'm having an external effect. I'm creating angels in the more external worlds. Angels are considered the external aspects of the higher worlds, like we said a moment ago, because they're external for two reasons. One is they're external in contrast to the purpose of that world. And secondly, they're external in contrast to the Sefirot. The Sefirot are their inner dimension versus the angel, because they're godliness, versus the angels are already something called a creation, and therefore they're more external of a dimension. Torah study by rote creates angels in the chambers of Yetzirah, versus mitzvahs performed by rote create angels in the world of Asiya. So interesting. They're both creating something, the two lower realms. But why is it that Torah study has like this lift, right? If I'm learning Torah by rote, it has a higher natural elevation of creating angels in a higher world of Yetzirah in contrast to Asiya. Why are mitzvahs only creating angels in the lowest world of Asiya? So interestingly enough, mitzvahs, when they don't have kavana, when they don't have conscious intent, they have little light and energy on their own. Not to say the mitzvah doesn't have value, as we've already established that the main thing is the action of the mitzvah. But that light and energy in terms of its ability to ascend, and therefore it can only ascend to the lowest world, to like one rung more spiritual than this world, if you will. Versus Torah has a tremendous light and energy, even when it isn't performed with intent, because it's the Torah itself. So that's why it's able to ascend higher, even when it's just being done by rote. So we're going to talk for a moment about chambers versus godliness, or creations versus creator. So Sefirot their conscious experience of themselves is godliness. They feel just bittul, just nullified to godliness. They don't have their own separate identity. Versus angels and souls, they do. They feel themselves as a conscious creation. So that's why if I'm giving from my inner dimension, then my avoda, my Torah mitzvahs can enter the inner dimension. They can merge with the Sefirot and therefore have this incredible spiritual experience, because my Torah mitzvahs are being absorbed back into Ein Sof, back into God's infinity. If it's coming from a more external dimension of myself, I can only create something external, aka angels in these more external aspects of these higher worlds in those external chambers. So angels are actually a lot more complex than I ever gave thought to. Angels have both form and matter. Sor and Homer. So the matter of the angels are actually less inclined towards godliness. They have more of a feeling of yesh, of I exist, separate from godliness. And they're not by nature wanting to be inclined towards godliness. But their entire form, their inner dimension, is their desire to connect. And that's why angels are constantly singing and singing praise to God, because they're striving to overcome the Homer, the matter, and just focus on the Sor, their inner form, which is their desire to connect. So there's two dimensions there. So when we do mitzvahs and learn without intent, we create angels. And the matter is created from the part, we shouldn't think that creating angels is a negative thing. It's not like, it's negative in contrast to what could be. Meaning when we're doing Torah mitzvahs with intention, we're merging with its sefirot, which are our inner dimension of godliness, versus we're creating angels, which is more of an external aspect since it's a creation. So we create both form and matter of the angels. The matter is a part of us that's unengaged, the part of me that's uninterested in connecting, and that's why I'm not having kavana. It's not just neutral. There's a part of me is actively not choosing to connect. And then the form, the inner dimension of the angel, the part that is connected, is my basic understanding of the Torah that I learned, or my basic understanding of my why I'm observing this mitzvah. That creates the inner dimension of that angel. In contrast, Torah that's studied for klipa intent, it's studied for my own ego, it's studied for me to look like a big fancy rebbitzin or someone who's knowledgeable, or like, oh, I want to know this and show this off at the Shabbos table, right? If it's being taught, learned with that kind of intent, it's going to stay in exactly where it was. It's going to stay trapped in klipa. Now, we're not saying, God forbid, that the Torah is klipa. The Torah is whole and pure. It has these chains attached to it now, which is my intent. My intent is weighing it down. So there's a few quotes in the Zohar that actually really connect with this idea that the Alter Rebbe brings for us now. What profit has a man of all his toil that he labors under the sun? Sorry, just to be clear, these are not, I think that's from Mishlei. For Shlomo Melech wrote that. It's not from the Zohar. This is the Zohar commenting on it. Okay, so I'm going to read it again. What profit has a man of all his toil that he labors under the sun? So even with the toil of Torah, if one does it for his own glory, it belongs to the category of labor under the sun. There's no profit in it. Meaning it cannot ascend higher than the sun. It cannot ascend to these higher spiritual worlds. It stays within this realm. This is also the meaning of the saying of our sages. Happy is he who arrives here on high with this Torah study in hand. Meaning this Torah study did not remain below in the world, in the lower worlds of Asir or Yetzirah, but no, the Torah study was able to emerge into the higher sphere of Yetzirah, Bria, or even, who knows, Atzilus. And therefore, they're able to actually enjoy them. So happy is a person who brings the Torah study with them. The Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, are one. For God and His will are absolutely one. And the Torah is a representation of God's pure, undiluted will. Nevertheless, the Torah will not ascend on high without kavana. Without kavana, the Torah does not have that ability that we're learning. The Torah that we're learning is not that ability to ascend. The Holy One, blessed be He, fills all the worlds, right? Animal without, there's nothing but God. Yet the way that God fills each world is unique. Different worlds have more of a godly experience, more of a godly revelation than others. So our world that we're in right now, Asiya Gashmi, is lowest in two aspects. One is the illumination of divine life force within it is greatly contracted. To the furthest degree, it is therefore corporeal and material, right? We have the greatest diminishment of God's light, greatest contraction. And B, even this contracted illumination is clothed in many garments and veils, until it is clothed in klipas noga, to give life to all clean, permitted things of this world, including the animal soul. So both the energy, the light is contracted, and on top of that, it's veiled. What we're going to look at now is idle chatter versus Torah study without kavana. But just to understand what we're saying there for a moment, what we're trying to say is that yes, God is everywhere, but the way that I can experience God is going to be different based on my conscious intent or not. Because if I'm going to do a mitzvah, and I'm keeping a mitzvah is able to take off all the veils. But if I'm going to keep the veil on because I'm in a klipa mindset, I'm doing it for my own ego, I'm not going to be able to have that higher godly experience. I'm not having a revelation of something beyond this world in this world. I'm not allowing myself to access that Torah in the same way because my veil of klipa, or the constriction of klipa, is keeping it in that way. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to contrast what happens with idle chatter. Like, what's the spiritual ramifications? What's going on when someone's just talking idly? Versus what happens when someone is studying Torah without kavanah, without conscious intent. So when the animal soul says words of Torah prayer without kavanah, the concealment characteristic of this world is absent. Yet why? Because it's Torah. So Torah doesn't have simsum on it. It doesn't have that level of concealment. Yet the contraction still applies as follows. These are holy letters, right? That we're saying holy words of Torah. Therefore, the klipas noga of the animating soul, our animal soul, does not constitute a veil of separation, concealing or covering the divine holiness clothed in these letters. So there's still less of a concealment when I'm just talking idle chatter, because these holy words are being said, and therefore they do not have the same amount of concealment in terms of my animal soul saying them as when I'm just saying anything else that's not Torah. So with idle chatter, Klipas Noga conceals and covers the divine holiness in the animal soul when it's saying those words. So there's like this double layer of concealment there. But ultimately, of course, animal vido, there's no place devoid of God. This is in terms of my experience. How much revelation is there? That's what's up to me. So God is found within the animal soul, even when he's speaking idle chatter. Of course, God's always present within us. The question is, how much can I experience God? That's depending on how much layers of concealment. If I'm speaking words of Torah, there's going to be less of a concealment, even without kavanah. And if I'm saying words of Torah with kavanah, I'm not going to have any hester panim at all, because there's no hester panim, there's no concealment of Torah. Torah is above the world. There's no connection to the concealment of this world. So here the Alter Rebbe is going to bring us some quotes. God is the most hidden one of all the hidden, quote, and God is called a hidden God. Except, when is God not a hidden God? When a person is engaged in holiness. The fact that God is enlivening them is concealed. Basically, God is constantly concealing himself. God is putting himself into a state of concealment. So unless I'm actively revealing God, God's going to be in this state of concealment. And yet we have this power to reveal God in our life, and we're learning how through kavanah, through conscious intent. However, with the holy letters and the words of Torah and prayer with kavanah, the klipas noga is transformed to good and absorbed into holiness. So they're saying, what happens when we're learning Torah and saying words of prayer with conscious intent? So now, the klipas noga, first of all, in our animal soul, the energy that's saying these words is not just going to be left neutral, but it's going to be, or not just not going to get in the way, right? Where at least, there's not going to have a concealment through the klipa of the animal soul, like we saw previously, but no, it's actually going to be transformed itself into holiness. But the illumination of holiness that these words contain is contracted to the furthest degree, since the voice and speech uttering words of Torah and prayer are material. Meaning there is still a level of concealment in terms of it's still physical, it's not something spiritual. And physical means there's a vessel. It means that, and there are also vessels in a spiritual sense, they're just more elastic, if you will. Meaning it's still very much contained in terms of revelation because it's material. In the era of Mashiach, the tzimtzum will be removed. We're going to have no more layers of concealment and constriction of God's light, and we'll experience God's glory in this world. As the quote says, it's a prophecy, the glory of God will be revealed for all flesh to behold. Meaning there's not going to be, like, just if I'm having kavanah right now, then God is revealed for me. No, the entire veil over our consciousness is going to be removed, and all flesh will behold God's glory. Thank you for taking the time to explore today's Tanya together.